guys could be here tonight. So, a little background on Sex Week. This is the 6th annual Sex Week. And then we also have Sex Weekend every spring in April. And basically, Sex Week was created because two Harvard students felt like there was a lack of conversation about issues of sex and sexuality on campus, and they wanted to add it to our campus dialogue. And so today, this Sex Week, we have 12 events. They range from workshops, more interactive style workshops, to lectures, presentations, facilitated discussions, all about issues of sex, sexual health, gender identity, sexuality, relationships, anything and everything that we feel like is missing from Harvard's conversation. Because we really think that human sexuality should be part of a lifelong education, and we're upset that it's not at that stage right now. So, basically, we have free safer sex supplies on those 2 tables in the back, and we'd love everyone to take as much as they'd like. And then at the end, we're going to give you guys like little tickets, and we're going to have a raffle for nicer sex toys and other fun items. And so we'd love for you to stay at the end, if possible. I'm going to hand it over to Anand.
Hey guys.
Thank you so much for coming.
My name's Anand. I started organizing this event at the beginning of the year because I kind of wanted to round up Sex Week a little bit. And luckily enough, I talked to the Sanskrit professor here at Harvard, Gokul, and he said there's this really awesome guy who knows a lot about Sanskrit and Tamil. And I was like, oh my god, that's awesome. We should get him to speak at our event. And then that's where I met Tyler. So I hope you enjoy the event. It'll be fun.
Hello everyone, thanks for coming. I would like to thank Harvard Sex Week for putting on this event. I was very thrilled when Anand reached out to me. I was also flattered because I am definitely not an expert in the Kamasutra, although I wish I was. And so what we're going to do tonight is basically, we'll cut to the chase. Why don't we start out with a Sanskrit pickup line? So this Sanskrit pickup line is from Kalidasa's The Abhignana Shakuntalam, or the Recognition of Shakuntala, which is sort of one of the most famous, highly regarded works of Sanskrit drama. And the way this is set up is you have Dushyanta, the king, he first sees Shakuntala, who is the love interest, the beloved, and sort of their relationship determines the rest of the play. And so when he first meets her, he goes, Manusheshu katham pasyat asya rupasya sambhavaha na pravataram jyotiruteti vasudhatala. Which, for those of you who don't know Sanskrit, goes, beauty such as this, no woman could give birth. The quivering lightning flash is not a child of the earth. And so the guiding metaphor here is one that also we have in English, which is, your beauty is electrifying. And so when we think about the Kamasutra and when it was written, where it's from, it seems very distant. It's 2,000 years old almost, from different geography, different cultural context, and yet, in spite of that, there is a lot to relate to. And so hopefully we'll be able to see that, get a sense of that tonight. So here we are, the facts and fallacies of the Kamasutra. So we have a game plan. First of all, we're going to ask, what isn't the Kamasutra? Then we're going to proceed to ask, what is the Kamasutra? And then finally, transition to, why read the Kamasutra? Which, for lack of a better term, you can just say, who cares, why bother? Why pick up this text and spend time with it? So hopefully, we'll get an answer. So the Kamasutra today. So let's look at the way that the Kamasutra has influenced or manifested itself in contemporary pop culture and beyond. So first of all, not the Kamasutra. Not the Kamasutra. Still not the Kamasutra. Not the Kamasutra. This is actually a website. This is a website called The Kamasutra of Food, which is footnoted in this book, which is the Oxford University Press edition of the Kamasutra. why it's in there is amazing. It's just amazing. Then we have Not the Kamasutra again. Here's a board game that's available on the dark web of Walgreens. I gave the section that's not sold in stores, which is they have a very extensive selection of foreplay accessories. I was gambling with my dad on a cruise ship in January, and we came across this slot machine. Still not the Kamasutra. Here's an advertisement for Zoo York skateboards. Still not the Kamasutra. And then finally, a couple weeks ago, or like last week, even Mary Claire had an article that was Kamasutra 101, and then presented a bunch of positions that aren't even from the Kamasutra. And so I called my friend who was in charge of that and asked her why she did that, and gets clicks, she said. So we've sort of looked at what isn't the Kamasutra. So let's run it back and ask, what might it be? Well, there's a difference, first of all, between what the Kamasutra is and what we know it is versus what it says it is. And so that's the first distinction. So let's look at what we can know about this text. Well, first of all, we sort of think that it was written around the 3rd century by some person named Vatsyayana, or Malanaga Vatsyayana. The reason why we know, or why we think that it's written in the 3rd century was because he mentions certain kings who were ruling around that period. And we also know that the Kamasutra was referenced in Subanthu's Vasavadatta, which is a prose work from the 4th century. And so that's how we sort of triangulated the time. Vatsyayana, there's still argument about whether Vatsyayana was a person from the court, whether he was a celibate monk, whether he was in fact a she and maybe a courtesan writing this text. There are many arguments, but the most dominant one is that he was a person of the court. We also think that Vatsyayana likely lived in northwest India, and that's simply because throughout the text he presents stereotypes, and he often stereotypes people from the south and people from the east. And usually he attributes to them sort of unorthodox or unusual or degenerate sexual practices. And so that's how we can sort of guess that he's from the northwest. And then the Kamasutra has a history in India. It also has a history in Europe and America, where it was first translated into English by Sir Richard Francis Burden, who maybe he was knighted because he translated the Kamasutra, I'm not sure, but he translated that in 1883 and caused a huge stir in Victorian England, and also sort of fueled the flames for the raging Orientalism that was going on. What we're told. So there's what we think was actually the background of the Kamasutra, and then there's also what the Kamasutra says about its own origin. And so I'll just read a little bit of history. For when the Creator emitted his creatures, he first composed in 100,000 chapters the means of achieving the 3 aims of human life, which is the vital link with what sustains those creatures. Manu, the son of the self-born one, made one part of this into a separate work about religion, but Haspati made one about power, and Nandan, servant of the great god Shiva, made a separate work of 1,000 chapters. Then we go on, and Vatsyayana condensed the entire subject matter into a small volume to make his Kamasutra. So basically we go from 100,000 chapters to 7 chapters. So let's look at its structure. So it has 64 sections, 36 chapters. You'll notice both of those are they're perfect squares, 7 books, and 1,250 passages. And what we have for the chapters begins with general observation, moves on to sex, going through taxonomies of different sexual positions, archetypes of lovers, various types of biting, scratching, slapping, sexual thrusts, oral sex, sex down under, which is like the southern anal sex. That was my translation, sex down under. Then we move on to a chapter on virgins, wives, other men's wives, courtesans, and then finally the much beloved erotic esoterica, where you have lots of spells, salves, and whatnot for achieving ends if you cannot achieve ends through the other chapters. And so what you'll notice, first of all, is that what we think of the Kamasutra is just this one chapter. And there's a ton of other stuff. And the question is, why do we all think that the Kamasutra is just about sex and sexual positions? Well, I think I figured out the answer while reading Wikipedia and JSTOR, which is, there was another text that was published right after the Kamasutra in English called the Anangaranga, which was basically a distillation of just the 2nd and the 7th chapters. So basically all the meaty bits. And that was published, and instead of people were, I guess, going with market economies, people were like, oh, I could pay for this text that has all this stuff that I'm not really interested in, or I could just cut to the chase and get the BuzzFeed version. And that's sort of what the Anangaranga is. And it became basically what people thought of when people thought of the Kamasutra. You also notice that we have virgin wives and other men's wives. And these chapters were to teach or to instruct ways of courting, flirting with, and winning over all of these different character types. The courtesan chapter says at the beginning that it was actually commissioned by courtesans. And so the directed audience there is, it's instructing courtesans on proper behavior as well as ways of winning over men. So we do have this, at least surface level, appeal to both men and women in the text, which we can talk about more in a second. There's still this erotic esoterica, which is like the best way of trying to translate this word that basically means of the Upanishads. That's the name of this chapter. Why it's that, I'm not quite sure. But let's just look at some examples from this text, or from this chapter. So the first one, like, you got to know if you're going to be a lover from the 3rd century South Asia, which is, if you coat your hand with the shit of a peacock that has eaten yellow arsenic and red arsenic, whatever object you touch becomes invisible. Like, pretty sweet. Never tried it. Second one, if your lips have been reddened with luck, and you rub them 7 times with the sweat from the testicles of a white horse, they become white. And then finally, and then here's a great one. It's sort of, this is like when I also think of Harry Potter and whatnot, if we're still with this amount of levity treating the text. If you coat your penis with an ointment made with powdered whitethorn apple, black pepper, and long pepper mixed with honey, you put your sexual partner in your power. And so there's an entire, whether or not this was actually practiced, we can probably say it wasn't, but then it begs the question why this would be in the text, if it's sort of like this imagined practice.